The methods or ways you pay your employees in CenterPoint are called earnings. Some typical types of earnings might include earnings that are used to pay employees for work performed, earnings used to advance employee wages prior to work performed. Earnings can also be used to reimburse employees for work-related expenses that they used their own money for. And then finally, earnings can be used in CenterPoint to track paid leave. There is a separate video on the setup of earnings. This video will cover how to add earnings to the employee setup. We can get to the employee setup by going to Setup and Employees, and in other prior videos, we were working through the setup of this particular employee. So I'm going to highlight this employee and click Edit, and we're going to go to the Earnings tab. On the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, you're going to notice that there are a list of earnings, and those are earnings that have already been added to the employer. To add that earning to this employee, I would just put a check mark in all of the earnings that are valid for that employee, and it would add it to the list. So I'm going to go off screen and add the earnings that I need for this example. You can see that I added several earnings for this employee. I just want to note that typically you wouldn't have an employee necessarily that was both hourly and salary, but I did add both of them for this example so that we can see the details of both of those. As I'm highlighted on the employer at the top left, on the right-hand side are going to be some fields that would allow me to set up a default rate for that type of earning for that employee. It's going to start out at 0 when you're first setting up the employee. This is also a place that you'll be able to come back to at a later time to update rates of that type for that employee. So if I go ahead and on the base hourly rate, set it to $16 and hit Tab. I have several hourly earnings, and what it's going to do is take all of the earnings of that type and it's going to adjust their rate of pay. Now you'll notice that it adjusted the overtime one as $24 rather than $16, and that's because when we set up that overtime earning, we had put in a multiplier of 1.5 times. So it went ahead and adjusted it properly. I just want to note that if this were a salary employee, you might not want it to adjust your any paid time off or any leave type of earning with a rate. On salary employees, we use that earning to track the number of hours of leave that they've taken. On an hourly employee, we also use it to not only calculate or track the number of hours of leave they took, but they also wind up getting more pay for it. So I just wanted to note that. Now I can click update and it'll update those earnings. But what you'll probably want to do moving forward is to set up an effective date for those earnings. So you can say that you're creating a new effective date. And at this point, my effective date could either be their last raise date or it could be the beginning date of this database. I'm going to set mine to be the beginning date of this database. On the employment tab of the employee was a place where we maintain their last raise date. So if I want this change to update their last raise date, I can check this box here. Now mine's already been updated, so I don't need it to update that. But in the future, if I give them a raise, I may want it to update that. If I update the last raise date for one type of earning, then I don't need to keep updating it again for each and every type of earning. I only need to update it once. I'm going to click update and it updates all of those hourly earnings. So you see the hourly earning got updated, the overtime earning got updated, and the paid time off earning got updated. So each one of those had their rate updated. I'm going to highlight the employer on the top left again, and we'll adjust the different other types of earnings. If I put in a earning adjustment of $36 on my piece rate, so I have certain earnings that are called piece rate earnings where they get paid per something. In this case, they get paid per students. I could hit tab on that and it'll bring up all of my different piece rate earnings. But as you notice, some of my different piece rate earnings, when they were set up at the employer level with a default rate on them. And they're different rates for different ones. So if you're not adjusting all of the earnings in your adjustment, you can uncheck the ones that you're not adjusting and then put in a effective date again for that adjustment and then click update, and it only adjusts that one earning. If you're only adjusting one earning, there is another way that you can do that. You can highlight the earning on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, you'll see the rate of pay. If you need to make a change to it, what you can do is add a new effective date. So I'm going to put in a new effective date of 1/1 of 25. Click OK. It'll default the current rate into the box, and then I can update it. So now I've got a history of those rates. I've got the old rate at this prior date, and I have the new rate at this date. If you do happen to add an effective date that you didn't mean to add, you can select it in the box and then click the remove, and it'll remove the effective date that you desire to get rid of. Okay, I'm going to go back up to the top and highlight the employer again. On a salary rate, if I put in an adjustment here, if I put in $26.50, for example, and hit tab, it's going to bring up all of my salary earnings. Now, that $26.50 rate happens to be a weekly rate, so I'm going to let it adjust it. So I'm going to put in my effective date and then click update. There's going to be one other thing you're going to want to check on that salary earning. If I highlight the salary earning, you'll notice right below the rate is a schedule. Well, this is saying that that $26.50 is their annual salary. So when I go to pay them, it's going to take $26.50 and divide it by 52 pay periods, because we have weekly pay periods, and that's what it's going to pay them, and that's not what I wanted. So you want to make sure that you tell them what kind of schedule this rate of pay that you put in is. This was a weekly rate, so that's what I want to select in the box. Now, one last thing, when I'm highlighted on the employer, on the top right, there is a box for an overtime earning. In CenterPoint, there's two ways to do overtime, or to set up your overtime earnings. One is a calculated overtime, and the other one is a manual overtime. We do have a separate video on overtime that I encourage you to review to understand the different types of overtime and make the correct selection. If you have set up calculated overtime, you're going to want to make sure you add that calculated overtime earning to the employee, and then you'll select it in the box on the right. I'm using manual overtime, so I don't need to select anything in that box. I'm going to highlight one of the earnings, and I want to talk about some things that are the same for all of the earnings. For each one of your earnings, you are going to have a schedule for that earning. Now, there's some default schedules that are included with CenterPoint, but you might wind up needing to add your own schedule. This schedule represents the combination of pay periods during a month that this particular earning might be used in. So I pay weekly, and this earning is an earning that this employee would get each week. So I'm going to select this one called monthly pay periods, which includes all the pay periods of a month. However, I might have another earning, like commissions, for example, that is only going to be on the first pay period of the month. And in that case, I would want to select a schedule that was for the first pay period of the month. Okay. If you need to create a new schedule, you can click New to create a new schedule. If you need details on how to create a schedule, you can view the video on the setup of earnings. While I'm on the commission, I do want to point out too that this one had a rate in it of 0. There are some earnings that you will want to have a rate of 0 on because they're different each time you pay the employee. Things like bonuses, pay advances, commissions, things like that. You'll probably want to have a rate of pay of 0 on them. I'm going to go back to that hourly earning. So the schedule is the first thing. We've already talked about the rate of pay. For each earning, there is going to be an expense account of some sort that earning goes to. It would either be an expense account, a cost of goods account, an asset. Even though the label says expense account, it does allow you to select any account from your list of accounts. Okay, you could use the same earning for multiple employees. And even though we had to set up a default expense account for that earning, you can override it at this point. So I could choose a different expense account. So different employees might go to a different expense account. For each expense account, you could actually have 100% of it go to the account, or you can say that a certain portion, like you could say 50% goes to this account. So I can delete that out of there and put in 50%. And then I could have the other 50% or another percentage go to another account. So you could split out the expense of this wage or this earning to multiple expense accounts using percentages. The percentages just need to add up to 100. I'm going to change this one back to 100. Now, the details, the management details that this expense might get allocated to is something that you can also default here on their employee setup. If you are allocating your expenses out to different management details, you can set this earning to go to specific management details down at the bottom. So let's say that this person's pay goes to the store profit center and to my Illinois store location. Okay, I can choose those, and then every time I enter in a timesheet or pay them on a pay run, it would default the profit center and the location, but they can be overridden. Okay. Now, I didn't choose a project for that employee because they work on several projects. I'm going to select the project as I'm entering in the employee's hours. Okay. I could also change these other details as I'm entering in the employee's hours. Some employees, however, their rate of pay might be allocated across multiple profit centers or multiple locations. And just for those of you who are using other versions of our software, the profit center for those of you using the fund accounting would be equal to a department. For those of you using our agricultural product, a location is a production center. Tracking number 1 is equal to production year, and tracking number 2 is equal to production series. Okay, so if their wage, though, can't go to just one default profit center and location, but needs to be distributed to multiple, you're going to check this box to use an account distribution. Then you can select an account distribution next to each one of your expense accounts to tell the system how that expense is going to be distributed. So I can either select from one I have created or click New. There is a separate video on account distributions if you need to learn about setting up account distributions. So I'm going to select OK, or I'm going to select that account distribution, and I'm just going to right click on it and edit it. So you can see that this person's wage is going to be split among all these different profit centers, and that profit center is going to then also get split between different locations by these different percentages. So it allows me to really allocate this person's expense, their earnings expense, out to many different management details. Okay. Now, I could have different expense accounts going to different account distributions, but if I had multiple expense accounts here, I can only have them going to one default profit center and location. So I can't have them going to multiple default ones, but I can have them going to multiple account distributions. You'll want to make the same change for each one of your earnings. You want to make sure that you have each one of your, if you're allocating your expenses out to these management details, you want to make sure that each one of the earnings for this employee is allocated. Setting up one does not allocate the others, and actually different earnings could be allocated to different management details. Okay, so that takes us through most of the setup. There's a few things about certain types of earnings that I do want to point out. If you are using any kind of a piece rate earning, One of the things you'll want to check is to make sure that the unit of measure is correct. Now, that unit of measure is actually selected on the employer setup, but here you can at least verify that it's the right unit of measure. And if you want to require that hours are tracked as you enter in that earning, you'll have to enter in the number of pieces in order for them to get paid. But if you also want to track hours, you'll want to make sure that you check that box to track hours. On a overtime earning, you'll want to make sure that you have the correct multiplier in the multiplier box. And on a salary earning, we already talked about the fact that you want to make sure that you have the right schedule selected, but it also has a checkbox for tracking hours. Some people want to track the number of hours for their salary employees, and you can require that hours be tracked by putting a check mark in the checkbox. I'm going to save those earnings for that employee, and I'm going to go back in and edit that employee. After some time, you may find that a particular earning is no longer valid for an employee. Let's say that this employee no longer gets commissions. I could highlight the commissions earning, and on the right-hand side at the bottom of all of the details is a checkbox for active. So I can't just go up to the employer here and take the checkbox out of commissions if it's been used in a pay run before. The only choice I have is to make it inactive. So I'd want to highlight it, come over here, take the checkbox out of the active box, and then it won't appear on the list. Now, mine is appearing on the list because I have the toggle displaying inactive items right now. If I click on that bar again, it changes it to hiding inactive items, and you notice then that it would come off. It's still showing because I really haven't saved this yet, but had I taken and saved it, then it would have taken commissions off of the list. Okay, I can show you that. I can save it. I can go back in, edit it, and you see that commissions isn't showing because I'm hiding inactive items. To show it, I can just display inactive items, and if I need to make it active again at any point in time, I could go to commissions, come back down to the bottom, put the checkbox back in active, and resave it. And that takes us through the setup of the earnings tab on the employees, and you'll want to continue to view the videos on the remaining tabs of the employee setup.